Hi Chris, how are you?
Yeah, good evening, Rod. All is well in the sunny shed, sunny-esque shed. It's daylight and we're recording, so it's quite exciting.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, after the one we did properly in the day, that's two in a row.
That is true, but this is our normal sort of recording slot, isn't it? And yeah, it's nice to have some daylight now. The clocks have gone forward. Sorry, I had to think for a minute. Is it forwards? Yeah. So we've gone forwards an hour here in the UK.
Yeah, we lost an hour in bed, didn't we? And I think that's happened in America now as well with their daylight savings time too. So I think we're all shifting their clocks around.
We're all shifting our clocks. So it's episode 115, and it's the 8th of April, and it's 2024. Shall we get into follow-up?
Let's go straight into follow-up. It could be quite a long show. I suspect there'll be questions for me later on, and we've got quite a lot of news to get through as well. So the first thing was just a little bit of follow-up. We've been talking about terms and conditions quite a lot recently, and I noticed The Verge reviewed the MacBook Air M3. And I agree with their conclusion, and it's not a surprise considering things we've said about MacBooks before now. But they actually had at the bottom, and I've put the whole thing into our show notes, so I might put it all into the notes at the end as well, where they document all the things you have to agree to when you sign up to a new laptop. And I think that's really useful. And I don't even really think about it. I set up a new MacBook not that long ago, and I agreed to, and I'll go through them one by one. The macOS license agreement, location services agreement, using an iCloud account, sending crash usage data back to Apple, allowing Apple to use Siri transcripts, Apple Pay terms and conditions, and that led to a total of 3 mandatory agreements and 6 optional ones that the Verge had to go through to sign up on it. And if you don't agree with a couple of them, you can't use the laptop. And that doesn't seem right for a new piece of hardware you just bought.
It is interesting because who reads any of them? But you know what? I don't think Windows is much better. So I recently set up a Windows 11 device for my mum. So I installed Windows 11. I've not done this in a long time. But the amount of screens that I had to jump through to get to Windows 11. And what annoyed me more is I had to sign in with a Microsoft account on Windows 11 for my mum. She doesn't need a Microsoft account really. So that aggravated me a little bit. But equally, I was amazed how many T's and C's there were. And there was one around collecting data. Do you want to collect the mandatory amount? The optional amount of data was at the top, you could see, but scrolling off the screen was, oh no, just collect the required amount of data. It all felt a bit slippery, I'm going to say, not great. So I don't think Microsoft is covered in any glory here. You kind of I just want to get on and use my device button, please. But what do they do? Is this for when people take you to court, your T's and C's? I don't know. Like, who actually looks at these, and where do they ever get read or referenced or linked?
I was reading about this weekend, actually, about how it now seems you have to have a Microsoft account to set up a new computer to agree all those things. And we know, and we've talked about it before, that consumer versions of Windows 11 do things like monitor your keystrokes and send them back. And we've got a story later on about how the free version of Outlook is actually pretty much a data gathering exercise on the behalf of Microsoft as well. But this is particularly, I like using the word, egregious, that they make it really, really difficult to not have that Microsoft account. There is a way. Here's how you do it. You disable the internet connection before you start it up. When Windows displays let's connect to a network, you say no. On the screen, you press Shift F10 to open a command prompt, and then you type OOBE / bypass NRO and hit enter, and then it will let you not create a local administrator account. What a lot of nonsense.
Hopefully people on YouTube can't lip read as I was mildly cursing then. That is ridiculous, because I did try not connecting the laptop to the internet when I did that bit. But I agree, I think it is nonsense that you have to do it. It just seems, I don't know, it seems wrong, especially with all the DOJ and the EU DMA stuff, that you have to do that now. But interesting, we've both recently set these devices. And Apple's onboarding screens used to be quite good. Like, oh, you can set up some basic things, like when they move the mouse direction the other way and things, you had nice onboarding for that. But yeah, very frustrating.
I 100% agree. And it's another of those things that makes you think, well, why not Linux? Because it's really difficult and hard to get on a lot of the time. More on that later as well. But yeah, I just think these things are, we don't own our devices in the same way we've been bemoaning streaming services and we don't own our media. You spent $1,300, $1,500, $2,000 on your new laptop, and it's not really yours unless you agree to the terms and conditions for giving them parts of you and parts of your activity, and that just feels so wrong to me.
It'd be interesting if you didn't agree to them and then you had to take the device back. Would they accept it back? Apple probably would, but would if a third party, if you'd bought it through a third party, for example? I doubt it.
Well, I think if it was a Windows laptop, Microsoft might. But if you're building your own PC or something, then probably not. But then if you're building your own PC, you probably know enough to go and do the Shift F10 hack. But how much longer will that remain a thing? I mean, it's really hard now. Windows 12, Windows 13, it's going to be gone at some day.
Yeah, 100%. I'm amazed this hasn't happened before and we're actually coming out the other side of it going away. But I guess maybe that will happen with all the DOJ stuff.
I think the times are going to change, aren't they? You see the writing on the wall for a lot of this stuff. Anyway, let's move on to a sort of vaguely related thing. This was a story I picked up from Michael Tsai's blog about a user got their disk so full on macOS they couldn't restore it. They couldn't run any sort of time machine backups. They couldn't use Carbon Copy Cloner or one of those things. They couldn't do anything utility. They had to format the disk on this laptop to actually get up and running again with it. And they even tried sudo rm -rf. Don't do that, folks. In the terminal to try and delete things. There wasn't enough space to run a terminal command. How, in a modern operating system, do you let the disk get so full that you're unable to do file operations?
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking. How surely it polices itself a little bit so that you as a unwitting user can't do that?
There's a comment on the bottom of this. Every day I wonder how much longer Apple can coast on the reputation it developed in the mid-2000s. And that's cussing, that hurts, but there's a grain of truth in that. There really is.
Yeah. I think, it's the theme of the show, isn't it? I think that's the theme today.
Our dissatisfaction with Apple. But, and don't get me wrong, I still respect the company. I might have moved down a rung from love the company to respect the company. They make some of the best hardware in the world, and we're going to talk about bits and pieces like that as we go through it. But them and some of the other big players are really making life difficult for us all as users at the moment, and developers and all the rest of it. But yeah, you're quite right. We'll get into that later. Next bit of follow-up is about installing third-party app stores. Do you want to tell us about that?
I think this is just standard Apple now, and it is annoying. There's not any screen grabs in the 9 to 5 Mac article, but basically, if you want to install anything third-party in Apple's view, whether it's an app store or a self-hosted app and things, they're just putting up so many horrible screens now. And I get they should have a warning to basically say, look, this isn't 100% blessed by Apple. But equally, they've had scammy apps on their own app stores that were 100% blessed by Apple. But they're just putting up so many icky screens. It's just not good, is it? It's just not a good look for that company. I get you probably want one to go, look, you're going away from us. You're going to install something, but you don't need, I think they said, was it half a dozen?
A dozen, 12.
A dozen, sorry, yeah. Sorry, a dozen screens, not half, but a dozen screens that are, they've called it irritating and scary, but just not a good look. And I bet they come up every time you install. So, not a shock in the current world of Apple.
Again, this seems so short-sighted to me that they've been fined. They know the DMA is not going their way. They're not the only ones. Microsoft and Google and Facebook are all in this as well. They're not the only ones. But then you make it so hard, so difficult. If somebody's ticked this box or hit these buttons 6 times, they're going to hit them 12. You've made your point. You've made your point. It's absolutely crazy to me that you'd keep on going, and now this, and now that, and now the next thing.
And you're going to have tap fatigue. People are just going to go, blah, 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 and the more you do it, the more they're just not going to read it or look or care.
Yeah. So it's bad. That's one story. And then related to that is AltStore have got the iPhone back. You can pay by Patreon as well. So that's them getting around the core technology fee. Well, not getting around the core technology fee, but allowing them to support the apps that they're going to be selling via AltStore. I think this is good. Steve Troughton-Smith posted a tweet a couple of weeks back about how much clearer the privacy warnings were on where your data was going through one of these third-party app stores than they even were with Apple. And it's interesting, we'll come to it later, the Play Store's warnings are very explicit as well about what exactly is going to happen to your data within it. Whereas Apple's is just like, trust us, we're fine, as long as it's all kept inside. And that's quite a different approach, isn't it?
It is a very different approach. The AltStore stuff does look good. I do wish we were in the U for multiple reasons, but I'd love to be playing with some of this new stuff that Apple's doing.
I got to say, a system-wide clipboard on your phone, it's a really useful thing.
Wow, that would be quite cool.
Imagine a piece of technology we've had on our Macs and our Windows PCs and our Linux boxes for how long. Moving on, a story that I just like so much. I think we posted it last year. I'm going to post it again this year, and I've got a related thing this time. Neil Patel at The Verge posted a story last year saying, if you're going to buy a printer, just buy whatever brother printer is on sale for the cheapest thing, because they make reliable printers, that they're not scamming you, they're not selling you the toner or ink cartridges you're putting in them or giving you virus. It will work well, it will print labels, it will do the thing. And he posted the same one this year, said, because you slipped down the Google search algorithm because of the way things work, I'm doing it again. Just buy whatever brother printer is on sale. I went to my mother-in-law's at the weekend. Her crappy, fairly new Hewlett-Packard inkjet had packed up because it didn't like the ink cartridges. I made her buy this brother printer.
Yeah, this looks great. I would be well up for one of these, but I'd want something I can print photos and colour on. And I know you can get colour lasers, but I don't know. Maybe I don't need the photo piece anymore because I often just go to a shop and get it done properly because it looks so much better.
I think there's something in that. How much stuff do you really need to print in colour? I appreciate lots. How much stuff do you really need to print is step one. Step two is you probably can get away with most of it as long as it's double-sided in black and white a lot of the time. And laser printers are so much faster, so much more reliable than inkjets anyway, and much cheaper to run when you start getting into bulk that you probably could buy one piece of toner for this, one toner cartridge. It'll last you for years. So I think if you have a serious think about, do you really need colour printing, this may be the thing to go for if you're looking for a new printer.
I'm there. It's probably my family that aren't there. We've got a teacher and 2 students that need to print things off from time to time. So I am in the black and white space. I don't need much at all. It's just important financial documents from time to time. But so no, this looks great. I would give this the wake from sleep recommendation stamp of approval.
We go with the verge on this one. Moving on, I want to spend a little bit of time on this. I don't think we mentioned it elsewhere. Microsoft has split Teams away from Office to get in front of the DMA and other potential antitrust legislation in America. And I was listening to John Gruber on ATP talk about this week, and I know Teams is your favourite app. You've recommended it a couple of times for a variety of things. I hate Teams with a passion because Slack is just so much better. And I lived the life of we took on Slack internally within my department at the university. We ended up having to pay for it because it was so popular, and Teams came out, and we actually successfully pushed back and found the money to keep Slack going because we felt it was so much better than Teams. And every time I'm forced to use Teams, I think the same thing. It's garbage. It's badly written. Its permissions are odd. They update the app with strange brackets, and there's no consistent policy with it. But then, and John put this very well, I think, Microsoft did the evil thing well. They came in, they stole Slack's lunch in most cases because you can't make the argument, you can't beat free. There's a huge amount of money involved with Slack for lots of users. Teams is free, but not anymore. Now we've got you, and now it's part of it. We'll keep the existing people who are already in there in the gateway drug, but we're going to charge for it. And we're going to get out in front of the DMA and other potential antitrust things and split it out. Now the damage has been done. So well done, you pretty much killed the competitor. And John's point was, Apple should have done this, shouldn't they? They should have done all their evil stuff now, and now be making those concessions. Now people are so embedded with it, just to look good. I think it's just an interesting story of evil done well.
So I do love Teams, let's just clarify that, but I've never used Slack, so I've got not a huge basis for comparison, but I have used Skype for Business, Google Meet, and in my view, Teams is definitely better. Says that. This is evil done well, though, I do agree. Microsoft's gone out, they've bundled Teams to everybody, they've got all the big corporations on it, they've added features, you can use it as your PBX, you can use it for your online Teams meetings, your IM in, you can do Word and everything inside it. And then they've gone, right, we've got all the market share we need, boom, now let's separate it out so we don't do it. They've done the self-regulation. Now, Apple could have done the same with the iPhone. They've got all the market share, and you've got to know where your greed point is, I think. Yes, we know we're a greedy company. Once we're full, we now need to pivot and not be so greedy. And I think that's where Apple's gone wrong. They should have just taken a breath and gone, we've got enough now, thank you very much. Let's pivot now, keep the moral high ground, keep 90% of our customer base, hopefully continue to grow it because we're doing the right thing. And they failed at the last hurdle.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But I mean, you're wrong about Teams, but that's fine. It's what you're used to. You don't know any better. It's like Mac users back in the day. We'd show you a better way, but it's fine. I think the war has been won. Teams is the thing. Most of the university use it. It's just our little department are out there on the edge, and because there's a few of us who are sort of really passionate about how much better Slack was than Teams, we've found the money and we've got on and we've done it. And I hope those holdouts keep going, because you make this point a lot on this show. Competition is vital for a vibrant marketplace. And to make consumers better and to make businesses better, you need healthy competitors to make your products improve all the time. We see this stagnation in Apple phones. They've got the market share. They're not pushing forward any more time. Teams, I'm sure, will stagnate a little bit now because they've got the market share. Nobody else is going to come up with an innovative chat client now because it's been done again in the same way that Messenger or AOL did back in the day. So for me, you've got to have that, and it is interesting, and I'll put the link in the show notes as well. Relating back to our previous point about antitrust and Apple and are these products illegal? We're going to talk about Marques Brownlee later in this thing, but he released a video yesterday talking about is the iPhone illegal, and I think he does a really good job of saying what it's not actually illegal, it's the way it's stifling competition, and that's what's making it anti-competitive, and you see that all over the Apple marketplace by the fact that they've only got about 70% of market share in the US, but they've got 90+% of teens, and they're the next generation, and they're the people who are buying it. And it's as they've done that, they've built that walled garden up that you can't look outside, because you do wear your AirPods, and you do wear your Apple Watch, and you do get your messaging there, and you do pay for your stuff there. So it's that's anti-competitive more than just the iPhone. It's the services that you build around it. And that's exactly what Microsoft have done in this scenario, is that they've gone in, they've dominated a market, they've stifled the competition, and now they can sit back and rest on their laurels. Because no finance manager is now going to go, oh yeah, well, I will go and spend £100,000 on Slack a year. Not going to happen. And that's quite gross.
Yeah, I do get it. And I am that finance person in my company that would go, well, we could easily make a saving here. So I do get it. And like you say, Microsoft have done evil well. Like they've played the game. They know what they're doing.
Absolutely. I'm trying to place the link into the show notes there. I'll tidy that up in a minute. Do you want to tell us about the first news story if you're happy to move on?
Yeah, so into news then. So we've got Android's AirTag competitor is getting ready to launch. And weirdly, this has been held back for not quite a year, but nearly a year. It's due to launch last May. They believe it's been ready, but they've held it back because they've been waiting for Apple to update iOS around the unknown trackers around you kind of thing, and the way they're detected. So Google didn't want to launch more trackers, which feels like Google morally are doing the right thing here, which is strange. And Apple have taken a long time to get this code into the latest version of iOS 17.5, which is currently in beta. So I'm assuming once this goes live, they reckon in May, that then Google will be able to sell their trackers. And they are AirTag-like trackers, but both Apple and Google are using the same standard, I guess is the right way of saying it, to track legal trackers, which is 100% the right thing to be doing. You've got an unknown tracker about your person, in your car, in your bag, in your house, anywhere around, you will be able to know about it, and they're doing it in the same way, which they definitely should be doing, because I think maybe Apple have held back on doing any more AirTag hardware because they probably need to get this bit sorted, because there's just been a lot of press around AirTags.
There has. In fact, on ITV News on Sunday night here in the UK, there was a big piece on Apple AirTags being embedded in people's cars, to the extent that police were taking cars apart to try and find the AirTags. They were fundamentally buried within the bodywork and all the rest of it, so stalkers could track people around the place. So, and that's a bit hysterical, I think, in some senses. But there's definitely a risk, an unforeseen risk, in being able to find your car keys, that you will find illegal and illicit uses for these things. For all the benefits that they bring, there's always a downside, isn't there? So trying to get that right and trying to do it with the other big tech vendor in the space, who wants to do the same sort of thing, is the right move to make. And you want them to get it right. You want to be able to disable those devices that are, illicitly following you or stalking you. Let's face it, Lufthansa wanted to stop AirTags at one point, if you remember, putting them in people's luggage and things like that, so they wouldn't know how bad their baggage handlers were. So when it's a genuine problem and you've potentially got a stalker or somebody violent tracking you, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, 100% this is the right thing. It's, like I say, it's weird that Google seem to have the right moral compass here, but maybe, again, sign of the times.
Totally. Interesting story, though. Moving on, we've got a bunch of car-related stuff for Tesla and Apple together, really. The first one is Tesla specifically, and this is Tesla apparently have given up, or Elon more specifically, on building a $25,000 Tesla Model 2 in order to make a robotaxi. Now, if ever there was a bad decision when you've lost market share because of Elon Musk, he's being held accountable for the drop in sales of EVs in America. Certainly, he's changed my opinion on EVs, and I've got one of his damn EVs. Making a more affordable car for the masses would be absolutely the right way to go and keep winning some of those hearts and minds back. And for a robotaxi, when he's been promising autonomous self-driving for 10 years with absolutely no evidence that it's even possible, this just seems like such a boneheaded move to me.
Agreed on all fronts. Surely if you want EVs to be the future, you need to service all parts of the market. You've started at the high end, got to keep working down. Maybe they just can't produce one that cheap. Maybe the margins aren't there, and they get out of jail card. But it is weird how very few small EVs there are. If you are looking like for a super mini sort of sized EVs, they're just not there. Mini actually do one, and they've been there for a little while. But there's just the big manufacturers just aren't doing the smaller end of the market, which is a shame because people that want an EV, haven't got the money or don't need a big Tonka toy, aren't being served at the moment.
No, and it's and excuse me if you can hear my dog barking in the background. She gets very excited. I think this is a typical sort of big company playbook, though, isn't it? Is squeeze the people who can afford them at the high end of the market. So you put out your big SUVs, you put out your 3-ton hulking monsters, and you make them pay through the nose for it. And that subsidizes the cheaper cars that are going to come in afterwards. I've put a link in the show notes to a rumor of BYD, which is a Chinese company that is called Build Your Dreams, BYD. And they're about to release, potentially in the UK, but it's already in the domestic market in China, a car called the Seagull. And that comes out at around $10,000 for like a 190-mile car. Now, that is super interesting for lots of people. That is a super mini. That's going to get 2 or 3 people, or at least 2 adults and 2 small kids in their shopping bag. At a very compelling starting price. And there's, it's styled by one of the guys that did Lamborghini. I think cars like this will truly revolutionize the EV market. And Tesla not recognizing this to build some stupid dream that's years away, he's lost the plot.
Agreed. And BYD, to be fair, they're doing some interesting things. They do one called the Funky Cat. I've seen that around. They seem to be getting a little bit more prevalent. I know they're being imported into this country. So, yeah, it's interesting. And they're going after the right end of the market. This is what cities should be having. Little runarounds like this, not polluting. Fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, really interested to see where this goes.
Small battery, quick to charge. That's what you want. And for the right amount of money. Where people won't have that worry about dropping £50,000-60,000 on a car and then the battery being, a problem in 3 years' time, which is what we're seeing in the UK. Anyway, more car stuff, more EV stuff in it later, but we'll stick to Apple and Tesla for the moment. Apple is apparently going to have to lay off about 700 plus workers because of the failure of its Apple Car product and potentially the micro LED teams that were going to bring non-OLED things to iPads. Or not, iPads aren't OLED now, but there was a rumor they were going to be. That's right.
Yeah, I think the next iPad that we're tentatively waiting for, apparently early May, is what we're looking at, week commencing the 6th, will bring OLED. But I thought we had some form of micro LED in the current ones because they upgraded them at some point where they got a bit heavier and a little bit thicker. And hopefully OLED's going to take us the other way. So I was surprised to see Apple investing in micro LED when I would have expected me really to be pushing on more with OLED. It'd be great to get OLED in your studio display, in your MacBook Pro, in your iPads. We've got it in our phones and we've got it in our watches. So I'm surprised they haven't scaled it up because we know OLED works big. And
we've got it in our TVs, right? Yeah, we've got
the TV.
It looks great.
It does look great. My children have been playing on our LED TV and our OLED TV. And they're like, why is the colour so different between the two screens? And I was trying to explain to them why the TV, the OLED one is so much more expensive than the LED one. And then I think they kind of got it. But because you play Fortnite on those two screens, they look like different games.
Yeah. If you can afford it, speaking of things you should spend a bit of money on, you spend a lot of time in front of the TV. I think a good OLED TV is a high refresh rate, particularly to play computer games, is money well spent. I love my LG TV. It's one of the best things I've ever bought.
Do you know what? I never get bored of watching a film on it, a 4K film, and just go, that looks awesome. Do you know what I mean? It's very satisfying when there's a good quality picture.
Yeah, Ferrari looked great on it. Something like Dune looks amazing on it. And certainly Oppenheimer looked terrific on mine a couple of weeks back. Moving on, a story in Vault where Tesla and Apple come together in not a very great way. Tesla wants to prove an Apple engineer was playing a game on his phone when his Model X smashed into a safety barrier. What that's got to do with Apple, I don't really understand. If somebody is foolish enough to try and or be distracted on their phone while they're meant to be driving, that's on them. That's not Google's fault. That's not Tesla's fault. That's not anybody but the person who's in control of the vehicle's fault.
But I guess Tesla want to prove, though, that it's not their fault. The person wasn't paying attention. Therefore, we need to get the phone company to release some tracking information about activity on the device.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand in one sense that Tesla sell the self-driving features being so reliable that you could do that kind of thing, but you don't do that kind of thing. You know, nobody with a grain of sense should be distracted enough that they can. Having said that, you go for a drive in the UK and there's people on their phones all the time. You know, in the fast lane, traveling along, sitting next to you at lights. It is an unfortunate consequence of mobile phones.
I completely agree. You kind of want to get into your car and your phone being a do not use mode, but you can use CarPlay, and that's the only way a car safe way is the only way you can interact with your device.
Yeah, I'd agree. Moving on, there was a little article from Proton Mail. So followers of the show will know we use Proton Mail as our email provider. They're very keen on privacy. They've released a few new products in the last few months and years, but they were best known for secure email, highly encrypted. They've now got a cloud platform, a VPN platform, and others. And I noticed in the Proton blog from a couple of months back, 1st of March this is dated, that they're claiming Outlook, the free version at least, is a new data collection tool for Microsoft. Everybody talks about privacy washing campaigns of Google and Apple as they mine your online data, but now it looks like Outlook is more than an email service. It's a data collection mechanism for Microsoft's 801 external partners and an ad delivery system for Microsoft itself. I mean, in one sense, this doesn't surprise me. We've talked at the top of the show about what Microsoft does with your data. 801 third parties for installing an email client? No, that is incredible.
Yeah, I don't want to say on this because whilst I was setting up my mum's new shiny laptop, I did install this version of Outlook onto it because Windows Mail in Windows 10 was awful. And weirdly, Microsoft don't really give you a good email client. And to be fair, this version of Outlook is very good at hooking up to a Google IMAP account. Works very well. But the way they show you adverts in your list view, so you'll be looking in your inbox and you think, oh, I've got a new email at the top. It's not a new email. It's an advert, but it looks exactly like an email. It is so infuriating because it's so easy to click on it, and you've just got to tell your brain, ignore the first item in my inbox because it's an advert. But after reading this, I was like, oh, maybe I need to get them a different email client. But they just need a very simple email client, and it is frustrating that the platform does not provide one out of the box that isn't grabbing all your data. I know Apple Mail isn't the best one in the world. It is free, and I don't think it's doing anything bad behind the scenes.
So why wouldn't you install Thunderbird?
I'm not sure they still make Thunderbird, do they? Oh, really? Then that might be an option.
Still supported by Mozilla. I think it's not only Mozilla engineers that do it, but Thunderbird is definitely an option for you. From this article, though, they show one of the agree screens right at the start when you're setting up this version of Outlook, and the first line of it is, we and our 801 partners process data to store and or access information on your device, develop and improve products, personalize ads and content, measure ads and content, derive audience insights, obtain precise geolocation data, and identify users through device scanning. That's horrifying.
That is horrifying, and you are 100% right. Thunderbird seems like it is being actively developed. I thought it went through sunsetting period, but obviously I'm incorrect, so maybe that is worth a shot.
I think it's worth a look. Mac, PC, or Linux, Thunderbird is a cross-platform email client. That it's quite hard to make it work with things like Microsoft Exchange, but then I'd just use Office on the web if you were really struggling for it. If you couldn't use full Outlook, which tracks you less, but for a consumer end user, I'd say something like Thunderbird is a very good choice of email platform.
Yeah, do you know what? That's completely on me. I didn't even think about it, but fair play. They've really updated their website. It still looks a little dated, but I think could look around Windows 11.
But they're not tracking everything you do and your location and all that kind of stuff.
And serving you gross adverts that look like emails.
But that's Gmail. Gmail serves you gross adverts that look like emails too. So it's,
okay.
I mean, but it's a devil in the deep blue sea in that, isn't it? You've put allowed a piece of software on your computer that's explicitly doing it, and then you're working with an email provider that they give you a lot of good free email, but you pay for it in terms of ads.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I will take a look at Thunderbird. Good shout.
Moving on, also in bad news. So Jeff Geerling is a hacker of mostly Raspberry Pi systems, is where I came across him on YouTube, where he does things like, can you turn a Raspberry Pi 4 or 5 into a NAS by getting a Pi hat, which is like a piece of hardware you can put into the SATA connector of a Raspberry Pi, and then slot in SATA drives. And he did it the other day. He got quite a quick running NAS built from a Raspberry Pi 5 and 4 SSDs, and it's quite cool stuff. As he was doing this, though, and you'll see how up to date this article is, it's April 3rd, 2024, he discovered macOS Finder is very bad at doing file copies to SMB or NFS drives. It reads them very quickly, but it inconsistently writes compared to Windows and Linux machines. And that's disappointing, really. You would think something as simple as doing network copies would be fairly consistent, but no.
And it's not like this is a new thing. And in fact, it's been in macOS for donkey's years. I was surprised how bad this is. I've always found the way you connect drives, network shares, to be a little bit painful in macOS. Since when I first came over from Windows, it's never been fantastic. But this is a bit worrying for a system that's meant to be quite performant, very techy. This is surely a basic thing that it should be doing.
Yeah, it's pretty rubbish, actually, the way you do it. In almost all cases, I go up to the Go menu and I click Add Network. Is it Go? Is it Finder? Yeah, it's Go. Go, connect, go to folder or connect to server, and from that you put in SMB:// IP address or name of your server, and that lets you mount it. It might remember your password if you're lucky. It might remember the URL or the it's not URL, is it? URN is what I should call it for the absolute location of your network resource. And then you've got a plus to bookmark it, and it's janky. But not only is it janky to mount them, it's janky to copy as well, and that's not very good.
No, it's not. It feels a very dated way of doing it, whereas it should be more built into the Finder. But there you go.
Moving on, and I'm sure I had deja vu when I found this next story. One of the German states is thinking of, or is going to ditch Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office and going for Linux and LibreOffice. I think we had this 10, 15, 20 years ago, something like that, with one of the southern German states was going to do the same thing, and it failed because none of the end users could get on with Linux. So I think this is good for open source software, that maybe you can move most users to, Linux is better than it used to be 10, 15 years ago. It's closer to being desktop ready operating system than it ever was. We say that every year on the Linux side. But I just think it's interesting that, particularly in Germany, they keep trying this.
It is interesting because obviously there's something there, isn't there, in that you're then neutral, I guess. But I guess you've got to pick the right distro that's going to be updated, keep current. I don't know how any of that works in the corporate space, rolling out patches centrally, you're maintaining all your workstations. I think we might have reported on this when they first announced they were going to just go to LibreOffice back in 2019, and there wasn't talk of Windows, but now they're going to do Windows and LibreOffice. So, excuse me, I think that's quite interesting that they're doing the OS and the Office. But I guess if you've already done the Office version first and then you move the platform, that might make the change a little bit easier because you're not swapping two things at once.
And let's face it, I don't know how many end users really care. As long as they can turn on the computer, it starts up reasonably quickly, and they can get on and do their jobs using the tool that they're mostly familiar with, then that's fine. If it's typing letters or sending emails or surfing the web or, remotely connecting to something else to do your other thing, Linux does most of that. All right, on the edges, maybe not so much, but if they've not got an Outlook endpoint, in which if they do have an Outlook endpoint, you can run any web browser and access it, that's one thing. But if all you need to do is write a Word document, LibreOffice lets you do that and does it quite efficiently. It does some things better than Word does. So I think there's a bit of retraining, but then, as you and I both know, new versions of Word and new versions of Windows require a bit of retraining anyway. So your point about support is well made, though. You might need to pay an open source company or a separate IT company to give you a bit of support for a while. But Red Hat have done that, Ubuntu have done that, SUSE, Linux do that, and they're a German company as well. So there's a way and a means.
Yeah, there is. And you're going to save a fortune on license costs. It's going to be a scary number. I don't know if LibreOffice has a Teams equivalent, but I assume it does Outlook and Word and Excel and PowerPoint. But all of a sudden, you could be in a different space from a licensing standpoint. I certainly know our Microsoft bill where I work is substantial because we run the company off it. But to move away, the cost of exit is too much to swallow and too much upset. But if you can do it, it's worth it for longer term. 10 years from now, you'll be laughing.
Well, you and I are both doing the show notes on effectively the web-based version of LibreOffice. And it's not the smoothest thing in the world. We've had hiccups. I've had hiccups with it this week. But the one we were using on the Synology before is the same thing. It's LibreOffice with a thing called Calabra stuck in front of it, which gives you that team-based ability to sort of come in. I haven't paid any money for this. It's entirely open source software. If you've got an install of LibreOffice, I think the two things will synchronize in the same way that Word and the online version of Word will do the same thing. So most of that functionality is built in, and it's in your estate. Yes, now you need to run servers and things too. But as you say, it's the licensing per core that you're paying Microsoft to run the servers, that is a significant feature of this. Anyway, I wish them luck, I think is what I'm saying.
I think it'd be good to see. It would be great to know what it's really like and how people are getting on with it. How does it work on laptops? What's the power management like? What's the usability like? But most people in their day job just need to get to a web browser for a lot of people's day jobs, and I'm sure this will be fine.
Absolutely fine. Moving on, just a very small story that apparently the merger between Vodafone and Three, which are two mobile networks here in the UK, have a CMA roadblock. As we quite often talk about on this show, the CMA have a lot of saying this one more than most because they're both UK companies, or at least front ends to the UK for foreign companies at least. There's been a lot of mergers in the UK at the moment. This choice in networks is definitely going away with EE and BT and Virgin and whoever else merged for.
Yeah, there's EE, BT, and then Virgin merged with O2, and then now you've got Three and EE coming to Three and Vodafone coming together.
Yeah, so this one's under investigation. I'm not surprised. Vodafone's a big player who don't pay their taxes, so I'm quite glad that it's under investigation, really.
Yeah, I'm mixed on this one. I mean, at some point it'd be great if they just all shared each other's infrastructure and we could have amazing coverage. But is it going to happen anyway? They've let all the others happen. So I don't know. I'm a little mixed on it, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on, story in 9to5Mac about Jon Stewart interviewing the Federal Trade Commission chief, Lina Khan. And it's interesting because Apple apparently told Jon Stewart he wasn't allowed to interview Lina Khan. So this came out during an interview when he was back at The Daily Show. And it seems Apple were even more controlling about who he was allowed to talk to than we knew.
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one, this. I'm guessing Apple has rights to over direct employees, but over talent like this, I don't know. Why are you employing this person if you're not then going to let them be them? You knew what they were like before you employed them and who they would interview. So I find this all a bit odd, if I'm honest. I think I don't know, it's not a good look for Apple, is it, when they're meant to be out on the moral high ground?
Yeah. They don't have the moral high ground on this, do they? And it's been quite interesting looking at some of the responses. There is a point here. It's been quite interesting some of the responses of Apple people talking about how dare the EU, take this kind of control over telling us what we can do with our products when Apple bend over immediately for China. Without hesitation, they run different servers, Baidu services. Things go through Chinese services before they come to Apple, and they allow that quite happily in China. And that's fine. If that's the rules of China, then so be it. But you don't get to pick and choose what you're offended by. And Jon Stewart, they knew who they were hiring, as you've said, when they got Jon Stewart. He's opinionated and he says it, and that's for the good. It's for the good of all that you get held to account. So this is bad, and of course, Apple must have known this kind of stuff was going to come out the second they let him go. Why employ the guy if you don't want him to do his job?
Yeah, I'm surprised by all this. And there was rumours that Apple TV people weren't being allowed to do everything. And then that, it was going to, Apple going to be very governing on the content and no nudity or swearing. And obviously that wasn't the case. But this does feel like they're trying to manage it in a very old school way. And it's just not the world we're in. So I find this whole thing very bizarre.
It really is. Interesting. Moving on and back to cars briefly, because I just think this is a fascinating story. So we've talked a lot on this podcast about Marques Brownlee. You mentioned him earlier. He's a very good reviewer of tech. He has a massive following when it comes to tech. And about a month ago, he released a video called The Worst Car I've Ever Reviewed, which was a bit clickbaity. Link to it in the show notes. And basically, he goes through a new car called the Fisker Ocean. which on one hand he's very balanced about. He says it's a very nice looking car, it's got some interesting features, it's got stuff he really liked, like a solar roof, it felt very well made, incredibly comfortable seats. All good, but the software and a couple of quirky things about it were terrible. And it's called the worst car I ever reviewed, and that was it. Well, there's been a bit of a fallout from it, where Fisker didn't want him to review the car, it would seem, because they didn't give him one. He had to get the car from a Mitsubishi dealer, which is a bit odd. I don't know why a Mitsubishi dealer had a Fisker, but such is life. Obviously, it was a trade-in. The first owner of the Fisker had only done 300 miles on it before he traded it in, so warning. But Marques is now being credited a certain extent for more than 40,000 people cancelling their orders and the company being in financial difficulty. In fact, there's a story today from up to £15,000 off the Fisker Ocean if you want to go and buy one today in the UK. I think buying one from a company that's about to go under, probably not a great move, but isn't it interesting the power potentially a car reviewer can have?
It is interesting, but especially somebody like MKBHD or Marques Brownlee. He is a great reviewer, very well respected. I thought his review was fairly balanced in that he was pointing out lots of good things around it. It was quite positive, but the software was awful. And I think to a point, some of the car was dangerous, like where it was flashing at you. And even if you're in the eco mode and then you boot it, all of a sudden it will kick in essence, the sports power that it's got, which just seemed strange to me that it would do that because you don't expect it. I know your car needs to move quick sometimes to get out of the way, but there's a balance there, and that could do more harm than good. It just seemed very bizarre. And then he's then done a follow-up video where he's been given a different Ocean, Fisker Ocean, but with the 2.0 software. And it does fix some of the bugs, but still not great. How is this sort of car, though, allowed to enter production, be sold to people when it's a bit buggy? Like, I mean, it doesn't fill you with any certainty that you're going to get home all right in it. If what happens if the software crashes whilst you're driving it or is buggy? It all doesn't feel right that it got into well, it feels like it got into production, but that it left production without some form of sign off here. I don't know. It is worrying now how much software bugs can be attributed, like we saw with potentially with the Tesla one. That could have been a software bug. Who knows? But do you know what I mean? You're so reliant on the computer. How does it get signed off?
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it, that the NTSB in America, or whatever our agency is, Department of Transport, I guess, here in the UK, don't get any sort of say in that. When it came to cellular networks, we were always told that patches for phones and things had to be signed off by the carriers to ensure they weren't endangering the phone network. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. The phone manufacturers are more or less able to put what they want, and maybe that's the case with cars now. Oh, it'll be updated, it's fine, this will work, that'll work. That new Volvo EX30 I quite like the look of is in a similar state. It's needed software updates, but this Fisker was particularly problematic because people on the version 1 of the software had no way to update it. It had to go back to the dealer. So you're letting it out in an unupdatable fashion and then leaving it to drivers to hopefully come back in and get their cars updated. It's a shame. You want new entrants to a very staid market to sort of shake things up like Tesla did 15, 20 years ago. I think it's good for the car industry to get those little shocks, but this isn't the car to do it, and it's a shame because it's quite a pretty car.
Yeah, it is quite a good looking car, and I like the idea it had a sunroof. It does transpire the sunroof doesn't generate a huge amount of battery power, maybe enough to do 1 mile per day, which it does make you wonder what's the cost of having the sunroof. Like, is it worth it, and the potential extra weight? But I thought having a solar powered sunroof is quite cool, but obviously it's just not efficient enough to make a difference.
If it's just enough to run the car security systems or air conditioning when you're not in it on a hot day or something like that, then that's probably good enough. I'm okay with that. You may as well make use of the sun if you've got it. Let's face it, global warming, we're going to have a lot more sun. So I think I'm okay with that. But if you're going to put the sensor in, report on it as they're doing now. But yeah, it's an interesting story. I think it's worth watching Marquez's review because it's a very balanced review, and it's follow-up one if you're interested enough. But it seems like bye Fisker.
Well, it feels like they should have had a better relationship with him and equally not put out a car that you didn't want somebody to review. Like, I'm sorry, you shouldn't put any product out you don't want reviewed. But B, engage with him, work with him to resolve the issues, and then actually could have gone the other way. Like, he could have equally done a follow-up video going, I've been working with Fisker, I've on it, they've updated my car, we've now got version 2.5 of the software coming out that I've helped them correct the bugs with my feedback.
I think if it's not ready to be reviewed, it's certainly not ready to be sold.
Agreed. 100% agreed. Like, how did anybody think that was the right thing?
Yeah. Anything else in news?
No, I don't think so. I don't know about you, but there's lots of legal news and bits and bobs, but there's just there's still no exciting tech.
I'm going to talk about some later. Moving on, media. I think I saw Dune Part 2 2 weeks ago and didn't mention it on the show, did I?
I think that is correct. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember back. I was on holiday, I think, so maybe you saw it in that period.
I remember trying to encourage you to watch Dune Part 1, which you went away and did.
I did do my homework. Yeah. I've watched Part 1. I thought it was very good. I'd actually like to sit and watch it again because I thought it was really well done.
Well, Part 2 is terrific. It's really good. It was a cinema that was too hot. It was 2.5 hours long. I felt like my eyeballs were boiling. Obviously, they were trying to recreate the atmosphere of Dune in the cinema while we were watching it.
That's not what you need, is it?
It wasn't great. It was quite late on a Friday night, and I went with my two daughters, and we were all boiling by the end. Half the cinema stripped off. But
there's nothing worse than watching a film in too hot a condition, though. I'm sorry. It's the worst, because you just feel sleepy. Dark room, too hot.
Too hot or too cold. You don't want that. It's not that hard to get the temperature around 21 degrees, is it?
You'd have thought not.
Anyway, it's a terrific film. If you liked Part 1 at all, go and see it. There was one poor bloke sat behind me who hadn't watched Part 1 and just thought he was in for a nice trip to the cinema. He said he got it by the end. But what a great film, what a great cast, what a great score, looks amazing, wonderful direction, and I'm delighted to see Denis Villeneuve has come back and agreed to do at least the first part of the next book, which I thought is unfilmable, but if anybody can do it, Denis Villeneuve can, so I'm properly excited to know that there's going to be another episode in this Dune franchise.
Is that how I'm meant to say his name? Because I kind of thought it was Dennis, because it's Dennis in the UK without the second N.
Denis Villeneuve. Come on, you're a Formula One fan. There's been Villeneuves in Formula One.
I understand Villeneuve. It was the Dennis bit I was struggling with. My pronunciation's not very good, and I think I say what I see too much.
Nothing wrong with that. But I'm excited. They're good books. More please.
Yeah, maybe I need to text some friends and see if anyone wants to go see it.
Yep, I'd recommend it. Watch Part 1 again and just go and enjoy. Let it wash over you.
Yeah, that's not a bad shout. I do like Part 1. Okay, so I haven't watched anything very exciting, but MasterChef's back in the UK, which I didn't realise. So I've been watching that. And then my family's just found a quiz show called The 1% Club. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. So it's
Lee Mack.
Lee Mack. It's a bit like Millionaire. You start off with an easy question, they get progressively harder. But it's been quite a cool show to watch with your family and your spouse, because just some of the ways it works, some of the questions are quite visual and you've got to spot a difference, or you've got to find a pattern in the words. It's just quite interesting just to see how people's brains operate very differently. I was watching it with my wife the other night and she suddenly goes, "That's the answer." And I was like, "How did you get it?" So she just walked in the room, glanced at the telly and got the answer on a reasonably hard question. But I love it. It just shows how somebody's brain works very differently. But anyway, would recommend the 1% Club. It's on ITVX here in the UK. It's all free to watch with adverts. There's a lot of adverts, but would recommend because it's quite a cool family show if you like a quiz show. There you go.
Fair enough. Did you catch up on Taskmaster?
We are all over Taskmaster. I am loving it.
It's a great season. Once again, the greatest lineup of celebrities ever to take part. Everyone is.
They always pick a really good eclectic mix, but the dynamic kind of seems to work. I don't know how they work out who they're going to get, but whoever does that, he, she, them, they're doing a fantastic job, because I just think they always get 5 people that just kind of work, and they're usually different ages, different everything, and I think it's great that you've got a real good dynamic there. So yeah, it's fantastic.
I'm with you, it's great. And Great British Bake Off, Stand Up to Cancer is on. I always enjoy that show. Good celebrities, and it's a different feeling to the sort of normal Great British Bake Off. Unlike MasterChef, which I gave up on years ago because the format began to irritate me. It was the same thing every time. GBBO stays quite fresh to me.
I love Great British Bake Off, but I was putting a face because I haven't seen the latest Stand Up to Cancer ones, which I should watch with my family because we usually quite enjoy it. I agree with you on MasterChef. It is quite a stale format, but I still like. I can't explain why I like it. So there you go.
I would say in the latest run of Stand Up to Cancer, they have Rod Gilbert on, and I'll do my terrible Rod Gilbert impression. But he's actually been through cancer recently himself, so that was really quite a touching episode to watch too.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yep. Moving on, unless there's something else in media we've missed. Nope. Moving on, games.
Oh, sorry, media. Yes, up and coming on the 10th, which is 2 days away. So Wednesday the 10th, it will be Race Across the World, which I can't wait for. So this is Series 4. And then I think also in about a month's time, we've got Clarkson's Farm Series 3 coming. So we are, in my household, looking forward to both of these TV series.
Race Across the World is exciting. I believe it starts in Japan. I'm curious to see where they're going to go from there, unless it's across Japan. The other rumour I heard was we've only got one episode of the Grand Tour left, and then
That
it's
is
done.
correct.
But apparently the show might not die, and they might be seeking alternative presenters.
Ooh. I love the Grand Tour, but I wouldn't be against having something a bit different. I personally want Rory Reid to come back, who was on Top Gear for a short period in the Chris Evans, Chris Harris era, Matt LeBlanc. I thought he was fantastic. I just thought he had a very young person's take on cars, and I just thought he was really good. And I loved him with Matt LeBlanc and Chris Harris. They were my favourite trio. I can't explain why. I just thought they were funny. I love Matt LeBlanc's sarky humour. Chris's knowledge of cars is great. And then you had Rory's view, which was just very different, because he was a very different person. I thought it was great, and it's a shame he's just ended up at Auto Trader doing their YouTube channel. But that's what I'd like to see. But anyway, there you go. And they are doing that with Top Gear. I think Chris Harris and Paddy are going off to do something, driving somewhere, but it won't be called Top Gear anymore. So there is some more car stuff coming. There's got to be a car show gap with Grand Tour going away, Top Gear going away. But it would be nice maybe to see something, a different dynamic.
I agree. And good luck to Freddie Flintoff. That was a real shame. Moving on, games. Apple, in a vain attempt to get in front of some regulators, has opened the App Store up to retro game emulators, apparently, according to stories from The Verge and 9to5Mac. It's in the latest thing. I think this is too little too late, wouldn't you say?
I mean, come on. Like, really? Like, it's great you've done it, but you should have done that 10 years ago. Also, I did see somebody quote on Mastodon, they can't wait to see what Apple define as retro, because it's a very arbitrary term at the moment, but I'm sure they're going to have something specific on there where somebody tries to emulate a game from 10 years ago and they go, well, that's not retro enough, but what is retro?
Imagine the opportunity Apple had for a third-party person to come along, bring in an open source thing and sell ROMs from an officially licensed Sega, Nintendo, Commodore games from back in the day. Pick one. They're everywhere. Original iOS games from back in the day. We've talked about that. They have missed such a trick here that it's just this is the whole scandal of the DMA and Department of Justice and everything writ small. Yeah, we got round to it. We're trying to get in front of it, but they'll do it very badly. They won't allow ROMs in. It's just going to be a disaster. It's purely for show, as far as I can see.
Completely agree. It's just they're trying to just put some sugar coating on all of the rubbish stuff they've done lately.
I've got nothing else in games. Have you got anything?
Sadly not. Play Gran Turismo, but you probably don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it. Main show. I've got an Android phone, Chris, and I released a video on YouTube. Have you got any questions before I give you some feedback?
I'm not surprised, if I'm honest. So you text me at the weekend and you said you put up a show on YouTube, and I watched it. It's a very short video you've done. It's about 5 minutes long, so I'd recommend people listen to that. So I wasn't surprised, because equally I've been thinking the same lately with all our talk around the DOJ and the icky feeling I think Apple are leaving with us. Part of me was like, I wouldn't mind to go and try something else out. I don't want to go down the Windows route, but I could see me trying out Android. My big sticky point is the company where I work doesn't support Android in any shape or form. Whether that will change over time, I don't know. But right now we're not, and therefore I can't really do this and function in my day job, which would be a big problem for me. But I did have a look at the Samsung Tab S9 as a replacement for an iPad. I'm about to buy a new iPad, and I was like, well, actually, could I go and get an Android one and just try it? And I could probably replace my tablet is easier than my phone. So I wasn't surprised you've done it, because I've had a similar thought, but I haven't followed through on it. So that's a bit of background, I guess. So I guess it's you in a similar place to me. I've had enough. I'm going to vote with my feet and try something different. I know you said you're going to trial it for 30 days.
Yeah, that cues me up nicely, really. So the thought process you've been through was exactly that. I'm a little more free to move than you. because it's just Outlook as far as the university's email servers are concerned. That's probably jumping ahead a little bit, but I think it's worth it. You do have to agree to another sort of phone administrative thing, which might be interesting for you corporately, that you give more rights to somebody if you install Outlook on Android. So your ability as a maintainer of the Office thing in the middle, you get more permissions of what to do with the device, ability to delete it remotely or whatever. I don't know what I've given up. Or Android's just better at telling us what you're actually able to do as a device administrator. But that was quite interesting. Sort of the account came along with an extra permission. It does seem to evolve, but as I say, that's jumping ahead. But that might be interesting for you to consider, actually, when you're thinking of bringing on other devices into your organization.
Yeah, it's fair. But we just limit just to iOS as our own BYOD policy, more so when we have to maintain it and give support. We've only got one way for you to connect to us, but it may be something we have to consider in the future.
Something to think about. Anyway, so my path went like this. I'm a bit fed up with Apple. Now is as good a time as any to do an assessment. Where before WWDC, they're doing things that annoy me ever more. So let's have a look. What's out there? I don't want to spend a huge amount of money on a phone. I was quite interested in the new Samsung Galaxy S24. You and I have talked about that at length here. So I went to look at giffgaff, who do refurbished phones. And this is probably worth a diversion in and of itself, actually. What you can get hardware-wise refurbished on the Android side of the fence is really quite significant. So there's a link in the show notes to giffgaff. I'm sure you can get them cheaper somewhere else, but at least you're able to go to a network provider who will sell you a contract. At least you get, if there's an issue with it, you can send it back. It's got a warranty period, etc., etc. It's good stuff. And you can pick a standard that it is. So like new, light markings and dents or whatever, but all of them are good enough to use. They come in a decent amount of packaging. They come with some removal tool and a charging cable. So pretty much what you get from the manufacturer. But if you were to click on the Samsung tab on this, they give you the range of Samsung devices you can either pay monthly or pay up front. I want to pay up front because I didn't want to think about that hard. But you could have something like a Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, so as good a phone as they make from a couple of years ago, for £389. Now, I don't know what the equivalent iPhone of that generation would be, 13, 12 maybe, but I almost guarantee you're talking 400, 500 quid for something like that. An S23 Ultra, £529. So last year's absolute top-end phone that all the new AI features are coming to, that's the 1100 flagship at the moment, is half price. It's £529. So I went through a whole diversion thing, and maybe I'll just get something like this. And this is particularly interesting for people who listen to the show. If you scroll through their list of phones, you'll eventually get to their foldables as well. So you can have a Samsung Galaxy...
Before you go on, iPhone 13 Pro Max from 2022 refurbished from Apple is £850 in the UK. Just as before you move on to another one, so it's more like for the 22 that you mentioned. Yeah. So that's £500 difference.
It's big, isn't it?
Yep.
Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4, so last year's foldable phone.
Yep.
£449.
It's pretty good for a foldable phone because you do pay a premium. You
do. The Z Flip, the smaller one that folds up, £519. That's still the current one. They haven't announced a Z Flip 6 yet. So you can have a Z Flip 5 for £519. So I went down a path, as you can imagine, going, maybe I should just get this because it would be a better test. It's more like for like. But at the same time, I didn't want to spend a huge amount of money. It's the ecosystem I'm trying to test more than the phone itself. And I hope that comes over in the video that I made. So I thought the only thing I can do is go for a Google. What's the news? Google Pixel, that's of a decent price, and I managed to pick up a Google Pixel 7 refurbished like new for £339. So that is last year's standard Pixel. So that's the equivalent of the iPhone 14, effectively, for £339. So I thought that was pretty decent.
That's cheap. I would say that's a lot of phone for the money because the iPhone 13, just regular 13, goes for £590.
So it's a pretty decent deal, I think. So it's almost Google's newest hotness, really. So I thought that's a good benchmark for what we can do.
I think it's a fair device to go for to test the ecosystem, as you put it. You're going with Android on a Google device. It should be a good experience.
Yeah, I think so. So I'll hold it up to the camera so Chris can see it. I went for the white one. It comes in white or black. I think if you go for the Pixel 7 Pro, there's a bigger one as well, which is closer to the Pro Max that I was used to. So it's a smaller phone. It's quite slippery. It's glass on the back. It's glass on the front. It's got nice metal rails all around it, so it feels quite good in the hand. It's actually a really nice size. I got to say, having rocked a Pro Max for as long as I have, a more standard size phone is actually quite nice. I can get to all the corners relatively easily with my thumb.
Yeah, I'm not going back to a Pro Max. It's too big for me. I like the white. I've got my iPhone in white. I like it. I think it looks fresh.
Yep, I agree. So that's been quite nice. It fits in my back pocket without sticking out too far. So physically, I quite like the phone. I got to say, it's a really nice feel in the hand.
USB-C?
USB-C, of course. Yeah, USB-C on the bottom, so I was able to swap over for all the things I was charging. Not MagSafe. That is a small sticking point. There's some annoyance for MagSafe for me, but it does do Qi 2 charging, and it charges quite rapidly on one of the Apple wireless chargers I've got around the house. But if I try and stick it to the thing in the van, which I'm used to having, it will just slide off onto the ground.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. I've got MagSafes around the house as well. And then, what sort of camera has you got?
I have no idea, but it's very, very good.
That's fine, because I don't even know what we've got these days. And then, is the screen OLED? I can't remember.
Yep, it's OLED 6-point-something inch screen.
It's very
nice
comparable.
Screen. Yeah, it is very comparable. That's the lock screen. It's got an always-on lock screen. So if I turn that off, you can see that's the always-on. So same as what I'm used to from a couple of years phone ago. No notch, so that's quite nice.
Do you find yourself looking at it and going, "Who's that phone?" They, oh yeah, it's mine.
Yeah, I do a little bit of that. So hardware-wise, I'm really impressed with it. It's got a 2x zoom, and it's got a standard lens as well. It's got lots of megapixels. Google Pixels are well known for having one of the best cameras on the Android side. I think it's them and it's Samsung make the best ones. I've got no complaints with it. I'd say the selfie camera is a little grainier than the iPhone one, but it's another generation of phones, so I can accept that.
Yeah, the iPhone one's not amazing. And how do you unlock it? Is it finger, face? I don't know how these work.
So it doesn't have Face ID in the same way that Apple devices have. I will say, I think there's a problem with the Google Pixel and its fingerprint sensor. And I've said in the show notes, which I won't make it into the version you guys get that listen to, but I'll talk about it. I had to send the first one back because it didn't register as having a fingerprint sensor. So I got the phone on just before the bank holiday on the Thursday. I immediately went on the Thursday when I realised it wasn't there and sent it back. And to be fair to giffgaff, I had a new phone by Wednesday, accounting for the bank holiday. So they did a reasonable job of sending it back. This one works. You can see in the screen there that it's got a fingerprint thing. So it has a fingerprint sensor under the glass, and that's it unlocked.
That's quite cool.
It is quite cool. If it worked a little more effectively, and I think it is a problem with Pixel phones, I'm trying not to review the hardware. You don't see this with any other manufacturer. They seem to have picked not a bright enough fingerprint sensor to pick up your thumb underneath it. So that's a bit irritating. If that fails, you can do face unlock, but it's less secure. I didn't want that, so it's a PIN number and on you go. So it's not the end of the world, and I'd say 85% of the time the fingerprint sensor is good enough. I'm not going to ding it too heavily for that. It's just mildly irritating.
I often find with the Macs, the fingerprint sensor on the keyboards, I have to retrain it every few months because I don't know if my fingers change a lot, but it seems to me that either it forgets my fingers or my fingers have moved on, and I don't know why. I find it really bizarre, and it still amazes me when it actually does unlock because I got so used to it not working.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. So it's good enough. The second one arrived. And I started putting my stuff on it, and I thought, this is a bit weird. It's running Android OS 14, which is the current version. 15 is about to come out. But it's on Developer Preview Q1 or something. So obviously an Android developer had this phone last time and left that version of the operating system on it. He'd reformatted it. It was all good to go as a new phone. But that was slightly irritating. And that was a bit annoying because giffgaff should have spotted that really and done something about it. But it brings me to something super cool about it, which is to reflash the phone, I didn't need to download Xcode, I didn't need to put it in DFU mode, I didn't need to download any nonsense things to my Mac or know what it was. I installed Google Chrome, I plugged it in, I said, please install this version of Android, the current version. It did it. It took about 2 minutes. Done. How cool is that? All you needed was a web browser and a USB cable.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I was so impressed with it. And if you do want to go to one of the 15 developer betas, there's a couple boxes to tick and you do it, and I'll do that for you too. So the ability to manage your phone from the device, and I've put the link, it's flash.android.com. You need to look at it in a in Google Chrome or a Chrome-based browser, so don't go and do it now. I put Chrome on my laptop just for this, but I'm still impressed as hell that that's all I really needed to do to sort out this issue with the phone. I restarted it, there was my fingerprint sensor on this working one, and I was off to the races.
That is quite cool. I don't use Chrome at all, so I'd have to go and find the Chrome browser myself. But they do some nice techie things like that, to be fair.
It's not a surprise. They're a company that makes laptops that are basically just browsers, aren't they? So I guess if you've got a Chromebook, you need to be able to have that kind of technology. But that gives you that sort of deep back end to be able to manage your devices using something like that. I was just super impressed with it.
That is cool. I think that is a nice thing because, yeah, historically, I remember when we've had issues updating iPhones and getting the right image on it. I too have sold devices when I've had betas on as well. And then, because you just forget, don't you? You forget to unenroll it or to move it on to the latest released version. I think, to be fair to Apple, they've made that a lot easier. But sounds like Google are doing a good job there.
They are. My second challenge, once I had software on, which I'll talk about separately, was that I could not in any way get my Apple AirPods Pro to pair with the thing. Just would not have it. So I went off and I bought myself another set of headphones for the princely sum of £49. I bought a brand new set of Sony, the link is in WFC 500s, which are earbuds. And what a lovely experience that was. I opened the box up. I should have left them in my own pocket so I could have shown them the camera, actually. I left them in my pocket. I left them in the windowsill. I opened the case up. The Android phone saw them in the same way that iPhones see AirPods. I clicked pair. It was done. They sit in my ears fantastically. They sound phenomenal. I think they may actually sound better than my AirPods Pro. They don't have any active noise cancellation. They don't have any transparency modes or anything. Again, I'm just blown away by how this ecosystem seems to promote better value and choice in hardware than I'm used to. Software I'm ignoring for the moment, but there is nothing wrong with the build quality of this phone, fingerprint sensors aside. You know, from that point of view, for clicky buttons, for a nice solid thing that you've got in your hand, and then for Sony, a company that makes quite good audio products, you know, to be able to produce something at that price that I'd say is competitive for, how much are AirPods Pro? 200 and something pounds?
About 230 to 250 pounds. When you put this link in the show notes, I clicked on it earlier and I thought, oh, these are kind of cool. And then I glanced up at the price and was like, whoa, how's it £14? Like, that's something I would buy my child brand new rather than giving him my hand down once. I thought they looked great. They come in colours. They look very diddy. But they look like they stay in the ears the same as my AirPods. So I thought they looked fantastic.
I'm super impressed with them. Like I say, they don't have any of the cool stuff like active noise cancellation. You need to go up a little bit more for that. But if you look at sort of the range of headphones you're looking at for phones like this, you've got Samsung make their own range of buds. Google make their own range of Pixel buds. The cheapest Pixel buds, I think, you can find them on sale for about 85 quid. You can find a pair on Amazon for 85 quid. And that's the manufacturer's own. And you're thinking, hang about, why are we spending so much on Apple products, which genuinely I don't think sounded much better than this?
I would need to listen, but I do love my AirPods Pro. I know that much.
Yeah, I did too. And they're still great headphones, but
It's a lot of money.
It's not 49 quid, is it, for a more than good enough, good sounding set of headphones?
Well, at £49, you could buy 4 pairs and a bit for the cost of one set of Apple ones.
Yeah. So that's sort of the hardware and stuff. Before I talk about, I'm going to give you a list of things I like and dislike. You got any other sort of questions about that?
I've always looked at the phones, and I think the Samsungs are the same. The build quality, I think, is so high now on all of the vendors. I think you'd be hard to ding any of them for the quality of camera, lenses, case, fit, finish. Do you know what I mean? I think they've all reached that point, and they've all reached it quite a few years ago, I think, to be fair. So we've covered hardware, USB-C. The Face ID thing I think I might struggle with, but not for long, because I'm sure you're soon going to get used to putting your thumbprint on it. Headphones we've discussed. Apple Watch, what are you doing there? Because obviously I've given up on an Apple Watch, as you know, but what are you doing there? So you've still got it on?
I've still got it on. So I'm using my iPhone 15 Pro Max to record the video this because I don't have a decent camera to replace it with at the moment. So the iPhone is still on, still got a charge. I come back into the house, the watch syncs with it, is effectively at the moment, so I don't lose my steps. But I'm actually not that precious about it. It's still on my wrist, A, slightly because I do like to be able to tell the time on a watch, but a normal watch would do that. And B, I really didn't know how Google Pay was going to compare to Apple Pay. The first time I go up to a roll, I don't carry a wallet with me anymore. So I wanted the backup of having an Apple Pay device still on me. I haven't used it yet.
What, the backup or the Google Pay?
The backup. I've used Google Pay for all manner of things.
I think Google Pay is on a par, is my understanding from my colleagues. I haven't missed my Apple Watch since I shunned it I don't know, about a year ago now, I think, and I went back to having an analog watch. For me, the Apple Watch did what I needed. It got me used to using Apple Pay, and I just using my phone, and it got me into the habit of going for a walk every day. So it's changed my habits, hopefully for life. So I just don't need it anymore, because I've carried on the same sort of regime I was doing before I had it. I don't regret having the Apple Watch because it got me into that regime, but now I don't feel I need it, and I wanted a bit less tech in my life, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Obviously I don't get notifications on it when I'm out and about, so all that kind of stuff's gone. This Android phone I leave on Do Not Disturb mode. I look down at it, the notifications are better, I would say, on the screen. The management of them is so much better. Honestly, you don't realise how bad notification management is on iOS. And I didn't, because I just react to my watch pinging on my wrist. But the ability to silence that, don't bother me with that again. This one's really important. Only let this particular thing through is just a luxury that we really don't have on the iOS side of the fence. I'm conscious we're going to go long, otherwise we've got one other story we want to talk about. So I'll very quickly fire off some things and you can have some questions. Things I really like about it. Maybe we should do this the other way around. Things I really don't like about it. I've already said the fingerprint scanner is garbage on this phone. That's hardware. It may not be fair. I'm sure other manufacturers don't have that issue. Maybe the Pixel 7 Pro is better. Dark light mode is inconsistent, so it's quite good on the iPhone. It would get to sunset, things would go dark, most things would work. Web browsers don't on this. If it's in dark mode and you click on something, you're blinded by the light again. But I kind of feel like I bought an app for the iOS device to do that too. I think I bought Noir or something like that to make the same thing happen.
Yes.
So I might not be being fair. Leaving iMessage, the only pain point it's caused me is you.
Because I don't do WhatsApp.
Because you don't do WhatsApp. And I switched off messages I thought on my phone before I took my SIM card out, but only today does that actually seem to be working for Chris and I, that he's getting SMSs from me. I think my family are mildly annoyed at me. They do WhatsApp, but they were quite used to the family chat being in messages, but they're slowly adapting to that too. So that's it as far as things I don't like. There will be more, but like I say, by far and away, the fingerprint scanner being garbage is definitely the hardest thing for me. The rest of it is largely positive. So here's the positive. The listen in the background feature, where this is always sort of scanning for what songs are going on around you all the time, and it just puts up a little thing at the bottom, is super cool. Every so often it chucks up a summary of the last few days. Here's all the songs you've liked in the background. Which ones did you like? And you can tap the ones you liked, and it improves the music recommendation algorithm for what it puts through. I'm using YouTube Music rather than going through Apple Music, but I've used Apple Music, it would do that too. That's just so cool.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you what you're doing for music. That is quite a cool feature, because I'm often with my kids and we're in a bar or we're in a restaurant and I'm like, oh, what song is this? Because my kids are really into music and I love it when they know like a David Bowie track, that they know it at being so young. But often I'm like, oh, I can't, my brain's not working. And then by the time I fired up Shazam or have the phone out, I would love a feature like this. I think it is cool.
It's super cool. It works so well. I was watching the end of, and I should have put it in media actually, I was watching the end of Three Body Problem, the Netflix show I talked about last week. And there was a Lana Del Rey song, Video Games, that came on towards the end. It's a great track. It recognised that just by the first 3 or 4 bars that played on it. And I thought, that this is technology working the way it's meant to be, really. It's doing it on device. It's not going off to the cloud to do it. Super cool. Really, really appreciate that.
Just sat there in the background.
Doing it.
Yeah, doing it in hopefully a non-freaky way.
Yeah. Bluetooth is so much faster. Connecting, disconnecting, connecting to the car, Android Auto, all that stuff, so much faster. I don't know what's going on, why it takes so long to negotiate those things, but those Sony headphones, they're connected by the time I've taken the first one out of the case. I hear it saying in the bud, Bluetooth connected. It's incredible.
That is quite cool. And I guess because your Tesla doesn't have CarPlay, you're not missing CarPlay.
No, I'm not missing CarPlay.
The thing in your van that you bought, that does Android as well as CarPlay, I'm sure. Okay.
And so does the new Golf.
Yeah, I think a lot of them have gone that way, haven't they? They just do both out of the box.
Yep. So, and Android Auto works really well. I haven't said it in my list of things I like, but I will say it now. Saying "Okay, Dingus" actually works as opposed to "Hey, Dingus," because "Hey, Dingus" absolutely doesn't. It gives you the wrong answers. Google is so much better at voice recognition, setting timers, asking it questions, getting it to play songs, understanding my terrible Scottish accent. It is a world of difference compared to what we're used to on the iOS side of the fence.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think the only thing I ask it is to set a timer, and that seems to be fairly reliable.
Yeah, but anything else, this just actually shouting at it in the car to play a particular song or album works so far 100% of the time.
That is cool. Side note, BMW recently updated the OS in my car. Every time I push the microphone button on the steering wheel, it just crashes CarPlay, which I think is BMW's fault, by the way, not Apple's, because that's the thing I updated was BMW OS. But there you go.
There you go. Wi-Fi 6, which this phone is, seems far more performant with my Wi-Fi network in the house. It's super fast. I'm getting 600 megabits up and down. Up and down via the thing, which my iPhone 15 Pro Max didn't. So, interesting. Already talked about the notification management. It does live transcription on device. So I had ATP this morning, just finishing off on it, and you can get a little window that pops up on the phone with exactly what they're saying accurately at that point. It's not stored in the podcast. It will do it during phone calls. It will do it doing music during playing. It is super cool.
Yeah, that sounds quite neat.
And my last one.
Sorry, all these things you're talking about, are they on Samsung's as well, because it's baked in the OS, or is this Google's flavour of Samsung, of Android, sorry, that they've done, and then Samsung's got their flavour? Have I got that right or wrong?
Mostly right. The skin's on top of Android. So Samsung have their own thing called One UI. The closest to the metal is Android's one, obviously, but Samsung only lightly brush it these days. Almost everything I'm talking about is the same. The listen in the background isn't. I think it's a Pixel exclusive feature, but everything else I'm talking about is just Android.
Okay.
The live transcription, I think, is just Android, as well as things like live translate when you're on calls and things like that. So if you're speaking to somebody in Chinese, it will, translate for you and translate for them back the other way. Very cool. The last thing, widgets are actually useful. They're not just dumb things that sit on your desktop that maybe one press launches the app or gives you a bit of a background refresh if you're lucky. My Sonos widget, which Sonos don't even bother making widgets for iOS, I can set up a widget for every zone in the house that knows when I come to it. I can play and pause music. I can change the volume on the widget for the speaker in the room. It's like witchcraft.
That is cool. I can see some of the appeal, I must confess. And like I say, I think if work would allow it, I would have probably done something similar to you, to dip my toe in the ocean and go, can I make this work?
I'm wrapping up. I still need a proper thought about apps. The major apps are just the same. I think I'd say, Outlook is Outlook. The Tesla app, I'd say, looks exactly the same, performs pretty much the same. It connects faster. The car unlocks a bit quicker when I walk up to it, obviously because of the Bluetooth stuff I've already talked about. The Fastmail app, which is the only one I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to go into banking apps at the moment, but the Fastmail app, which I use for my email, doesn't time out. It always used to time out in iOS. I had to quit it and relaunch it every so often just to get it to deliver new mail. That hasn't happened to me yet on Android. So I'm still in what I think I'd call a honeymoon period with the device, whereas, it's still a bit new and it's a bit different. But actually, the things that make it better really do make it better. And I don't want to be unfair to iOS. I'm coming to it prejudiced. I'm annoyed at Apple. I'm annoyed at their position in the DMA. And maybe I'm a bit bored. I've had that grid of icons in front of me since 2007. This is different, and it's properly different because I'm committed to it this time. I'm not just doing a couple of days here and there. So I've definitely got a honeymoon period thing going on, despite the bloody fingerprint scanner. But yeah, that's where I stand at the moment.
No, and I get that, because you're a bit like me. I think sometimes you just like a bit of change. It's nice to have something different, whether it's, change to the home screen or apps or whatever. And Apple has been very glacial lately, I think, of making some changes. I think sometimes they're too scared to make any changes. Because there's so many people using the device. So I can see the appeal, and maybe, like you say, the annoyance with Apple. As I've said to you, I'm in a similar place. I was looking at a Google or Samsung tab to see, actually, could I make that work for what I want, which is largely web browser and consumption of media. So I do get it.
Yep. And I think if you go all ecosystem in, there's a couple of YouTube videos on people going entirely Samsung Buds, phone, tablet, and then making use of the Samsung Dex thing, which is their sort of plug in your phone and you get a full desktop. It looks really impressive from what you can do with just a couple of devices. And you've talked for a while about folding phones. Could this replace my iPad? Can I do this with it? And maybe it can. But we'll let the experiment continue. So I hope that was interesting for people. I hope it was interesting for you, as you've obviously been Android curious. So
I think that is true. I am curious, and the only thing holding me back is my restriction in my office. Like I say, if that wasn't there, I'd probably bought a tablet to try out, especially if I could get one on a return basis, try out for 30 days. Like you, I'd been an Apple person through and through, but it is curious that I'm even more tempted than I've ever been in the past.
Fair. Anything else on this, or should we have a very quick discussion about the next topic?
We should probably move on to the next topic as we will go along, but we should probably circle back like a week in, 2 weeks in, of what's the software like. Because I think you're right. The main apps like your Outlooks of this world are just going to be the same, because I think they've all got to the point now where they've got their development down to a point where they're doing the same releases on iOS and Android at the same time, and they've got feature parity, and the UI is very similar. I know they've gone through lots of effort, I think, to get that delivery schedule sorted. Same on Windows. They're updating them all the time now, and therefore there aren't those big glaring differences that there used to be a couple of years ago. So the main apps are probably the less exciting ones. What I probably need to do is start looking at my phone and going, well, what do you do about this app here, or whatever it may be? I guess the problem for me is I've been so anti-Google. I'm completely out of Google's world. Like, you probably use Google Maps and things, whereas I don't. For me, I guess it's then all the apps that would need to change as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And maybe that's certainly going to feature my next video if I get around to doing another one, and I will get around to doing another one. But it's something we should talk about in the show, specifically the apps and where the pain points were and what does work and what doesn't work. And again, it's still early days, but yeah, let's move on, because we will go long otherwise. But yeah, I hope that was interesting.
That was good. I enjoyed it.
Good. I got a question just posed by a number of other podcasts and things I've been listening to and just watching the media. What's going on with the Apple Vision Pro, do you think? It's kind of quiet world out there at the moment.
Yeah, do you know what? The more I've listened, I was quite pro Apple Vision Pro, but I think I've warmed a little, cooled off. What do you call it? Thawed, because actually I'm probably not that fussed by it. I was quite interested because for me, I could do a lot of my world in the Vision Pro. I've still got the stigma of, do I want to shut myself off to the world? And I do work on my own 3 days a week in my shed, which I could easily use it. It would probably work for me for my apps that I use, all the office apps. I could just enroll it like I do my iPad, but it's $3,500, and there doesn't seem to be the killer feature. Like when you first picked up your very first iPhone, and I remember this, and I remember showing somebody I worked with, and I was just scrolling through my photos, and it was just mind-blowing how responsive the UI was, and it was like you could just tell this was different and amazing, and they had pretty much nailed it. I mean, there was a lot of ropiness in iOS, or it wasn't even called that, iPhone OS version 1, but it doesn't feel like the Vision Pro has got this killer thing. It's got some great stuff like the immersive watch a film, but is it better than watching it on my nice OLED telly? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. For me, it's just how quiet it is out there. And all the podcasts have been talking about is that Apple dropped a feature, an MLS sort of sizzle reel for the last year's, not even this year's sort of upcoming season, and it was bad. The cuts were bad. It wasn't immersive. You lost sight. There were, I think Gruber talked about it on his thing, and dithering as well. Jason Snell wrote a whole article about it and talked about it on Upgrade, and that's bad. And that was compounded by listening to Marco Arman and Dave _Smith. Yes, he's underscore, isn't he? Talk about how their sales on the device had gone. And Marco was talking about hundreds of users per week for Overcast, and that's just the iPad version of it, as opposed to the thousands, possibly tens of thousands that he's used to seeing. And underscore similar, that if he worked out how much time he should actually be spending on developing for the device based on the return for what he's put in, it's 8.5 minutes a year that he should be spending for the return of investment that he's put on the device. And that's staggering. These are people who are big developers on Apple platforms. Overcast is huge, Instapaper was huge, WatchSmith, WidgetSmith were massive sellers. They've gone out, they spent lots of money on the devices. Neither of them are really using them. Neither of them are seeing the return on the development times. And in some cases, I think Marco said he'd loaned his to a mate because he just wasn't using it anymore. And that's really telling. For Marco is the first person to go, I'm so happy, with this new thing that he's integrated into his life. And then he'll get bored of it in 5 minutes, but he's instantly bored of this. And that seemed to be the story for underscore. It seemed to be the story for Casey. It seemed to be the story for others, that this hasn't been the knock it out the park. Where's the stream of media coming from it that we were expecting? It's almost like it's A, too soon, B, too expensive, and C, the wrong product.
Yes and no. So it reminds me a little bit of, I'll get my words out. It reminds me a little bit of the Apple Watch. So it came out probably a year too soon. It's very slow. It didn't really do one thing really well. But you know what? They then shaped it and they probably wouldn't have got it where it needed to be if they hadn't have released it and focused more on notifications and fitness. So part of me was thinking that for the Vision Pro, but the Vision Pro is a lot of money, so massive barrier to entry. It does shut off the outside world, which I'm really cognizant of, especially my children. I want to make sure I'm present when I'm with them. Yes, I do things on my phone when I'm with them. We all do. But equally, I'm usually quite good at going, I'm going to put my phone down. I don't want to look at a screen. I want to, play a game of cards with them or whatever it may be. And that's my concern with it, is you've got a device that's literally putting up a barrier. It's very expensive. Are you better to spend £3,500, let's say £, on a Vision Pro, or just spend that on a nice big telly and get an iPad and get a Mac or whatever it may be? I don't know. I don't think Apple's found the killer reason for that device to exist. And we've seen it a bit with the iPad, haven't we? The iPad made sense 10 years ago as a medium device to slot in between your phone and your Mac. But they've reinvested in the Mac. The iPad now makes less sense now than it did 10 years ago. But now you've got the Vision Pro, which kind of uses the same apps as your iPad, as we've discussed. Is there room for that to fit in, for you to take another device? And we've all got way more devices than we had 10 years ago. We've got consoles, we've got Steam Decks, we've got more screens, more tellies, just everything. We've got way more devices. And I just think, is there room for that other device? And it was disappointing when Apple released it. I think this year they didn't do another video update to get people excited. They didn't have any more content than what they had a year ago when they released at WWDC. And then since it's gone live, what they should be doing is every month drop in some new content or something just to keep the user base engaged. But they haven't even done that. So do Apple believe in it? I don't know. Apple have released very little this year.
All what you said is correct. It's true. I agree about the barrier. I agree about the lack of content. It makes me wonder, it was rumoured forever and it's very expensive and they don't have the content. That seems like 3 strikes, really. And then there's the last part. They've lost the faith of developers. The Apple Watch had a healthy, keen developer community of people like Underscore, releasing WatchSmith, trying to do Overcast for it, making little games for it, trying to find a niche for a device that was affordable. Even in its unfinished initial state, it wasn't so expensive that people thought, oh, I'll take a punt on it. You and I both did. So this is a very different proposition. The cost is so much more expensive. It's so much more locked down. We see how Apple is performing and treating its developers and users. Some of us have moved to Android slightly. That all these increase the barrier to entry. And I think that is a real problem for them. Their flagship device that they've sold some of, they've got no content for. It cuts people off. It's a bit half-baked. It's very fragile. It's so locked down. The App Store isn't working. The developers aren't there. It's bad, bad, bad. It's bad all round.
Yeah, but I'm surprised they didn't really have a plan this year to market it and to drive people. And I know we've talked about it being a developer piece of hardware. It's being sold, but it's really aimed at people wanting to develop and do things for the platform. But they didn't have any, games on Apple Arcade that they'd pay to have developed. They could have easily done that. Or you took an existing property and go, right, developer, we're going to pay you to do a Vision Pro version and we're going to sell it pre-installed on them, and we're going to drop media every week or whatever, because they could do that. They've got their own TV production company. Like, they could be dropping Vision Pro exclusives. It just seemed very poorly thought out how they were going to drop it and market it and keep engaged. And like I say, not even having an event for the release seemed bizarre to me, that they didn't just do a refresher. But I think the problem they had is if they did do an event, they've got nothing new to tell us from WWDC, because they haven't really done anything. They've just probably polished the hardware, but they haven't really done anything with it. And then when they invited people to review it, there was more embargoes. When developers went to workshops, they couldn't talk about it. So there was just no hype really building, whereas sure, you want people to talk about it and to get people excited. I don't know. It all just felt a bit bizarre to me. But I'm not surprised we are struggling to fit another device into an already device-laden world. I don't think we either need replacement devices, and like I said, for me, the iPad has largely replaced my laptop. It's the device I take out and about. I never really take my laptop out of the house. I move it from the shed to the house and back. So that has been a replacement device for me, whereas I can't see the Vision Pro anytime soon being a replacement device for me. But I'm probably the person it could most be a replacement device for, because I'm in that world of apps and ecosystem.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it's worth us commenting on, and maybe when it's a worldwide release or something big happens at WWDC, although it's such a new device, I don't see what they're really going to change at this point. Worldwide, maybe. I guess we'll see. Anyway, we don't want to go too much longer, I think, because it's already a long show. I will just add, I'm not missing Apple Arcade on an Android phone. App of the week.
I'm not sure I would miss Apple Arcade either. I play a couple of games, but I'm sure I could get some equivalent games.
Yeah. App of the week. It's unsurprisingly not an iOS app or a Mac app. It's a website called DistroC. And DistroC, if you've ever been Linux curious, will let you try any of these flavors of Linux in a web browser. So if you think the Linux desktop is too intimidating, you don't want to install a virtual machine, you don't even know what I'm talking about, well, you can click on one of these, and there's a variety of the better known and slightly more obscure OSs, like Ubuntu is on there. Don't go anywhere near Gentoo, I would say. But Ubuntu, Debian, and Arch are probably worth a look if you just want to get a feel for what Linux is like. It'll put you in a queue if it's a particularly popular one, if you want to just take them for a test drive. I just think it's a super cool idea, and it's really well executed.
Sorry, I'm just firing up Ubuntu at the moment. It is pretty cool. I didn't really look at this earlier. I thought I'd save the surprise for the show of what you've put in. So it's just booting up now. Oh, display output is not active. I don't know what that means. No, it does look quite a cool idea, like you say. If you're curious, yeah, maybe I could do this for Android. I'm curious about Android. Can I go and have a play with it, please, and see what I think of it? So that does look good. I'm going to give this a go, actually. I guess one day we may end up doing this show, and I'll be booted into Linux, and we'll have to find recording and software to do that.
Well, it's an option, isn't it? At least this lets you try something like Pop OS and see what all the fuss is about with actually having to change your machine. I will also say, often you need to change your machine and just live it rather than just have a play with it. You need to see what your documents look like. You need to see what your email is. But if you've got absolutely no idea what you're getting into, I think this is a decent place to start.
You need to do your day-to-day, don't you? If you're really going to do it. Because like you say, if you just have a little kick the tyres, you're never really going to use it. It's actually using it, because that will tell you what works, what doesn't, what's better, what's worse, what friction there is. So weirdly, this version I've booted up looks like Windows 10.
Yep. I think there's a lot of recognition in the Linux world that the last time Linux users were happy was when they were in sort of Windows 7. So if you like KDEs and things like that often look like Windows 10 or Windows 7, and then the GNOME-based distributions are their own thing, but you very quickly sort of click into it. Anyway, that's my app of the week.
I like it. I think it's cool.
Thing of the week.
So this week I've gone for some hardware. So I have made a cheeky little purchase, a bit last minute, because I managed to get hold of one. So I've purchased, I'm just holding it up for you, Rod, a camera. And it's a beautiful classic looking camera. Oh, where's my camera? It's a Fujifilm X100 6 or VI. And it is a lovely piece of hardware. It's just beautiful. It's really well made. Like, you can't fault the quality of the camera. It's quite an expensive camera. It's over $1,000, but it's less than $2,000. So not ridiculous, but still quite expensive. It's got one fixed lens, takes an SD card. It's the brand new model that's out, so it's USB-C, even though it doesn't look like it would know what USB is. So it's USB-C, which is my prerequisite for most devices. It is fantastic. I haven't taken a huge amount of pictures with it, and it came at the weekend. But I managed to get hold of a second-hand one because they're massively back-ordered. And I went on a website. They had one in stock, and I managed just to grab it. So that was my treat. But I'm really impressed with it as a piece of hardware. The app's quite cool. Like, if you want to update the firmware on it, you do it in the iOS app. I'm assuming it's got an Android app. And I think that's quite neat. The whole, use the app to get your photos off is absolutely dire, as they've never been great, have they? Nikon, I don't know what Canon's like. But the best thing to do, especially now we've all got USB-C, is just stick a cable between the two and off you go. Very nice. Rod's holding up a DSLR Canon. What I would love with the iPad Pro that's rumoured to be coming out is stick an SD card slot in it to show it's a Pro device, because that's what they did with the MacBooks. But no, I love taking photos, and I've got a big camera. But what I kind of wanted was something a bit better than my iPhone, but not massive to carry around, because that was putting me off taking it. So I've tried to go for a very portable camera with just one fixed lens, because I love taking photos. I take a lot of black and white photography. I belong to the Glass website that we've spoken about on the show before, and so that's what I've gone and bought, and it is fantastic. And like I say, it's beautifully made, but I do need to go and read the manual, because there's lots of little buttons and features. I've never used a Fujifilm camera before, but It is, yeah, but it's just a lovely piece of equipment. Just to hold it and twiddle with it is just so well made. So that's my treat. Hopefully I'll have some nice photos to share with you at some point.
Yeah, it's a very pretty thing. It's a very classic looking camera. It makes me think of my dad's sort of DSLRs from in the early 80s and things like that, that sort of chrome metal effect that they had. Is it changeable lenses?
No, so it's fixed lens, but it's very retro looking. It's not DSLR, it's, I don't know, a compact system, I guess, but it takes good photos. I want it just for black and white street sort of photography that I do. I just take random shots of things, and like I say, post to glass, because I like that for me is a nice online community to share photos with.
And it does 6.2K movie recording, apparently.
I didn't look at any of the movie recording on it because that's just not a world I'm that fussed around. But it is great, and I do love the USB-C cameras because you can charge them on USB-C, so you don't need to take a separate adapter like we used to have to do and pop the battery out. You don't need to do any of that. And that is a big pro for me. So when I go anywhere, I just need my one USB-C cable, which is the dream. And I know Android users have had it for ages. So I can charge my tablet, my phone, my camera, my headphones with it. But it is just a stunning piece of hardware, just so well made. They would give Apple a run for their money on the build quality. And I think, to be fair, the OS is pretty good on it as well. It's very easy to use, very clear. Because sometimes you buy a nice piece of hardware and you get a very flaky OS on it, but it looks very good. So I'm really impressed with Fujifilm.
Excellent. I think we can call that a show.
I think so. It was good. So if anybody would like to get into contact with us, Rod is at g5maniac@marston.scot. I am at _CGP at marston.social. You can watch us on YouTube at wakefromsleep.com and click on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.